So I've sewn my facing. It's attached to the dress. Do a quick little check. Notice that there is no green stitching showing from the right side because that first row of stay stitching is inside the seam allowance. So now I'd like to trim away the seam allowances. So the first one, the facing one, I'm actually going to trim so it's fairly small. I'm trimming on just to the right of the stay stitching, so I'm trimming about a millimeter, couple millimeters away from the edge of the stay stitching, which then is a couple millimeters away from my seam allowance. Now the garment dress, this part does not have any interfacing on, so I'm actually going to trim that a little bit bigger, or trim it a little bit less. I think that's how I should word it. So you can see here, you do see some of the fashion fabric peeking through. So I've trimmed that. Well, now it still doesn't really want to, I can't really get that seam to lie flat. So the next thing I have to do, because this is an inside curve, I actually need to clip it. So I take my scissors and I do small little clips. This is a fairly tight curve, so I'm doing them about a finger width, a fat finger, I guess, apart. Sometimes I would do it, especially here, there's a nice big curve there, so I want to clip that. Some people don't like to clip into the stay stitching. We will be stitching over top of this, so we will have some reinforcement there. You just have to make sure you're not clipping your sewing line. Now you can take this to the iron board and I will press that seam open. You can see right away it's easier where it's been clipped. It's spreading apart, so that allows for the fabric to spread open. So let's head over to the iron board. Make sure my iron is on. No, it's turned off here, but let's get it on quickly to my cotton blend. And some people like to use the pressing ham. When it's this narrow, I often will use the little point presser because it offers a little, just a little space here to press. So I take my iron, it's on steam, and give it a little steam press there. Flip it around. Do the other side. Notice I did a finger press to press this open. So I'm not holding my fingers right by the steam iron. So I'm not giving it a push. There comes the steam now. Steam, steam, steam. So that's now pressed open. But now what I want to do is I want to understitch the facing. So let's go head back to the sewing machine to understitch the facing. So when you understitch the facing, that's going to be happening along this edge. So the facing part. And some people do the understitching wrong side up. My seams have been pressed open. I need to make sure my seams stay open. Then I start at the one end. When I'm understitching, I backstitch. So I start in a little ways from the edge, and I will backstitch a couple stitches just to hold it. Then stitch forward. And here, let me get this up a little higher so you can actually see this. So where I'm stitching, I'm not stitching in this seam. I'm actually stitching right here along side the seam allowance there. So let's get that stitched and keeping it flat. This is a curved seam, so it's not going to lie flat. This is designed to curve around your neck, or a child's neck. I think it's a child size pattern that I used here. So curving around, staying on the facing part, not going on the outside garment. Before I get to the end, I'm going to backstitch a couple stitches, and then remove that from my sewing machine. So the next thing I will be doing is trimming these other threads here as well, nice and close. My little snips here. And then next thing I would be doing is taking this facing and turning it to the inside. So see how beautifully that actually wants to turn. It's almost turning it to the inside perfectly without any pressing. But I'm going to press it nice and flat. So let's head over to the iron for a moment and give it a quick press. So there's my seam, there's my facing, quick press with my iron. There is my facing. Let's put it on the light here so you can actually see it. There's my facing, or my garment with the facing. So the beautiful edge finished with no stitching, looking beautiful.